that they were keeping the continual 7-day cycle. They could not have kept the lunar Sabbath. Now, the Jews going to war on the 8th day of the month. This is interesting because if the 8th is always a Sabbath, we already have read accounts that the Jews would not go to war on the Sabbath. So if the 8th day of the month was a Sabbath, they wouldn't have gone to war on that day. But yet we find in Josephus that they did go to war on the 8th and the 15th days of the month. And I'm going to just quote one from Josephus. It says, "Nor had the Romans succeeded in their endeavors had not Pompey taken notice of the 7th day, on which the Jews abstained from all sorts of work on a religious account, and raised his bank, but restrained his soldiers from fighting on those days, for the Jews only acted defensively on Sabbath days." So Josephus says the Jews only acted defensively on the Sabbath. Now notice this next quote. It says from Josephus, "But as for the Jews, when they saw the war approaching to their metropolis, they left the Feast of Tabernacles, and betook themselves to their arms, and taking courage greatly from their multitudes, went in a sudden and disorderly manner to the fight, with a great noise, and without any consideration had of the rest of the 7th day. Although the Sabbath was the day to which they had the greatest regard, but that rage which made them forget the religious observation of the Sabbath made them too hard for their enemies in the fight." So that was Josephus' Wars of the Jews, Book 2, Chapter 19, Section 2. And I wanted to point that out because here, when Josephus gives an account of the Jews going to war on the Sabbath, he mentions that. He says, now this was the Sabbath. It was unusual for them to do this, but they forgot about it, and they went to war anyway on this day. So this was very odd for this to happen. Josephus says it didn't happen, but here was an exception. So whenever the Jews were going to war on a Sabbath day, Josephus would have noted that. That was his style of writing. He would have said, now this was the Sabbath. So notice what he says here about the 8th day of the month. Josephus says, "So the Jews went on pursuing the Romans as far as Antipatris, after which, seeing they could not overtake them, they came back and took the engines and spoiled the dead bodies and gathered the prey together, which the Romans had left behind them, and came back running and singing in their metropolis, while they had themselves lost a few only, but had slain of the Romans 5,300 footmen and 380 horsemen." So this pursuing of the Jews, and then he says this defeat happened on the 8th day of the month Dies, which is Marchesvan, in the 12th year of the reign of Nero. Josephus, Wars of the Jews, Book 2, Chapter 19, Section 9. So check this out for yourself. Here he says that the Jews were pursuing after the Romans, and this happened on the 8th day of the month. If the 8th day was a Sabbath, then Josephus would have noted this. He would have said, and this was the Sabbath day. But no, there's no mention of it, and he just mentions that they went to war on the 8th day of the month. The 8th day was just a common working day. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is very interesting. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Mishmarat texts are the priestly service texts. They were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Mishmarat is a Hebrew term meaning watches, and is used in the instances as a reference to the 24 watches or courses of the Levitical priesthood. So now let's read from this Mishmarat texts, and here it says, "On the first day in the week of Judea, which falls on the 12th in it, the 7th month." Now think about that for a moment. The first day in the week of Judea falls on the 12th in the 7th month. That means the Sabbath day would have been on the 11th on that particular month. And now here's another one. On the 5th day in the week of Immer, which falls on the 23rd in the 10th month. So here the 5th day of the week falls on the 23rd in the month. So that shows that the Sabbath would have been the 25th of that particular month. And this just shows from the Dead Sea Scrolls that they were keeping a weekly cycle that caused the Sabbath to fall on any day of the month. Now I want to quote from some scientists and astronomers. There's many quotes from these who point out that the Sabbath has continued from creation. Okay, the first quote I'd like to read is, "The division of time into weeks is a singular measure of time by periods of 7 days that may be traced not only through the sacred history before the era of Moses, but in all ancient civilizations of every era, many of which could not possibly have derived their notion from Moses. Among the learned of Egypt, the Brahmins of India, by Arabs, by Assyrians, as may be gathered from their astronomers and priests, this division was recognized. Hesiod in 900 BC declares the seventh day is holy, and so also Homer and Callimachus. Even in the Saxon mythology, the division by weeks is prominent. Nay, even among the tribes of primitive worshippers in Africa, we are told that a peculiar feature of their religion is a weekly sacred day, the violation of which by labor will incur the wrath of their god. Traces of a similar division of time have been noticed among the Indians of the American continent. And now, on what other theory are these facts explicable than upon the supposition of a divinely ordained Sabbath at the origin of the race?" That's a tract called The Christian Sabbath by the Presbyterian Board of Publication. Now, he mentions here that the 7-day cycle is in Africa and all these different countries, and I'd just like to give an account of something. I went to Ghana, Africa, and in Ghana, Africa, they have a custom where they name everybody, they give a name to everyone based on the day of the week which they were born. If they were born on Friday, they have a particular name. If they were born on Saturday, they have a particular name. I was born on Saturday. So when I was there, they called me Kwame. Everybody born on Saturday has the name Kwame. Now, they also have other names that they're given, but everybody is given a name based on the day of the week that they were born. And they say that God, their God, is called Kwame because they say he was Saturday born. Saturday is the day they honor their God, interestingly. But this is an ancient ritual. I was talking to several people in Ghana and doing some research, and this ritual of 7 days, of giving a name to the day according to the day of the week they were born, is very ancient, and it's a 7-day cycle the Ghanaians have of keeping their week. Okay, now let's read another quote. We'll just read many of these in a row now. "One of the most striking collateral confirmations of the Mosaic history of the creation is the general adoption of the division of time into weeks, which extends from the Christian states of Europe to the remote shores of Hindustan, and has equally prevailed among the Hebrews, Egyptians, Chinese, Greeks, Romans, and northern barbarians, nations, some of whom had little or no communication with others, and were not even known by name to the Hebrews." That's very interesting. Let's read another quote. That was, here's another quote. "The week has been followed for thousands of years and therefore has been hallowed by immemorial use." Okay, and another one. "I have always hesitated to suggest breaking the continuity of the week, which, without a doubt, is the most ancient scientific institution bequeathed to us by antiquity." And now another one. Says, "As to question 1, I can only state that in connection with the proposed simplification of the calendar, we have had occasion to investigate the results of the works of specialists in chronology, and we have never found one of them that has ever had the slightest doubt the continuity of the weekly cycle since long before the Christian era. As to question number 2, there has been no change in our calendar in past centuries that has affected in any way the cycle of the week." And now another one. It says, "As far as I know, in the various changes of the calendar, there has been no change in the 7-day rota of the week, which has come down from very early times." And another quote, "Some of these, the Jews and also many Christians, accept the week as of divine institution with which it is unlawful to tamper. Others, without these scruples, still feel that it is useful to maintain a time unit that, unlike all others, has proceeded in an absolutely invariable manner since what may be called the dawn of history." Another quote, "The week of 7 days has been in use ever since the days of the Mosaic dispensation, and we have no reason for supposing that